Anytime, you're good.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, let's see if I can just fix this last. All right, sorry about that, everyone. I lost track of the time and trying to get back here. So do we have everybody?
Everybody but Todd Spriggs.
Actually, he just got on, it looks like, so we should be good.
Okay. So let me do some housekeeping here. So Jessica, so our new Power Board members have been sworn in, correct?
Correct.
Andy and
Mark.
Mark. Where's Mark? I'm not seeing Mark.
I'm in the chamber room.
Oh, okay. So you're just in the chamber. Okay. So perfect. Okay. So everybody's been sworn in. Okay, then if that's the case, let me. All right. So has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda then?
Yep.
I guess first, let me welcome everybody. Thank you for coming and on this virtual way that we have to conduct life. And so if everyone's had a chance, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve. Hauser.
Randy Meyer will second.
Who was the first?
Mark Hauser.
Mark? Okay, Mark did the first. Did you get that, Jessica? Okay. So, Andy, do you want to start well, maybe we better have Todd go ahead and start the vote.
Spriggs, aye.
Randy?
Meyer, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Mark?
Aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
Okay, perfect. All right, and did we have minutes? I don't remember looking at minutes.
Yes.
Was it the
We do
previous
have
month?
minutes.
It was from July.
Okay, so it wasn't an attachment, it was the previous email, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any changes, any questions on minutes?
No.
Okay, approval for minutes then?
Meyer, aye.
Oh, we need a motion first.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. This is Todd
That was Todd.
to approve. Yep.
Meyer seconds
And a
it.
second. Okay, so Todd was the first, Meyer was the second. Andy, go ahead and start us on the vote.
Palmer, aye.
Hauser.
And
Aye.
Mark?
Hauser. Aye.
Mark?
Can you hear me?
Yep,
He did.
Randy?
Meyer, aye.
Spriggs,
Todd?
aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. So, okay. So if that, then Rick, operations and generation update then.
Okay, we'll give you a little quick report. I don't know all the details, but it sounds like maybe next month they may have some partitions or something set up in the council room. So might be possible to actually have a real live meeting next month. We'll have to see how that goes. We'll keep you posted. Just to give you a quick update on the COVID side of things. So far, knock on wood, everybody's stayed healthy. We're still trying, emphasizing good hygiene practices, masks when in stores and things like that. But we're pretty much functioning normally, and where we can, crews work separated or individually as appropriate. So on that front, I think we're keeping things moving well. We did hire a new apprentice lineman that started on August 24th. His name's Jordan Jolly. He came from the water department, and we're excited to have him. And he's already started his classes, and he'll be a great asset to the department. So as far as our load, this is kind of for 2 months, since we had kind of a little bit of an unusual, we had the combined meeting with the council last month. On July 31st, we hit a new all-time peak of 43.6 megawatts. And then on August 17th, we hit another new all-time peak of 45.7 megawatts, which is about a 12% increase over our 2019 peak of 40.4 megawatts. So that's a pretty substantial load increase in a single year. Of course, I think everybody's aware that August was a really hot month with an extended period of, in the 108 to 110, 111 range. And that tends to drive it up even higher than if it just spikes up once, for 1 or 2 days. So, and there's still lots of load that, hasn't come on yet on the Washington Parkway and Telegraph area. Most of those apartments really aren't occupied yet. There's 2 buildings in Red Rock. That's all that's occupied. So I can foresee our load to continue to grow in the near future. So on the generation side of things, we ran most weekdays in July. We did have engine number 2 that had an issue, a broken control wire. It took several days to find because it would work intermittently. It would run for a few minutes and then drop off, and then it would run and drop off. But they finally found it. Was a simple fix once they found it, but it was quite a challenge to get it going. Fortunately, they got it going, ready to go for August. In August, we ran every day but 3 weekends, so all but 6 days we ran every day, which was fortunate because our during that hot streak in August, the whole Western United States was exposed to the high temperatures. There was some low wind output in California, and so prices went through the roof. UAMPS had to buy some power as high as over $1,000 a megawatt hour. Typically, we're in the 40 to 50. So you can see it was, what's that, about 20 times higher than normal for a few hours. So it was really good to have the generators and have them running. And Jake and Mike did a great job keeping those going. So any questions on what our loads have done this summer? I suspect we should be on the downhill side now. We'll get a little warm towards the end of this week, but I don't see that we'll be getting up that high like we were. In fact, I'll wait until I share the screen. Just remind me to show you, I was going to show you the load schedule with UAMPS to kind of see how things broke out there. Give you just a quick report on the projects we have going on. The 100 South rebuild is complete with the exception of removing the old poles. And I know there's some on this call interested in that. We have contacted TDS. They have indicated they have completed their design and have told us they would start work within a couple weeks. So we'll keep pursuing and putting the pressure we can on them. And then as soon as they get transferred, we'll go through and remove the old poles on that project. So we've completed, we're calling it the new Sienna Hills 601 feeder. We added there were 2 circuits out of that substation. The third one really hadn't been used much. And so we've put in a tie there by some of the new construction by the sewer lift station at the base of the hill, and allowed us to separate that feeder into 2 feeders, which will provide benefits in the future as the load continues to grow in that area. We've ordered the materials for the last segment of our fiber optics to go from our Main Street sub to our Buena Vista sub. But the materials, they call it OPGW, which stands for optical ground wire. And so their fibers are actually embedded inside of the top wire on the transmission structures. And it's 32 weeks out, so construction won't start until sometime in the spring when that gets in. Some of the hardware has been arriving, but we can't do much without the actual fiber. I'm going to share my screen here. Oh, Steve, can you help me with that?
Yep, I got it. Go ahead.
Let's see if I can pick which one. This one. Okay. While I got this up, we'll take a little step back. So this was, our peak day was August 17th. Hopefully everybody can see it on the screen. And it occurs at 6 o'clock at night. Pretty much either 6 or 7 o'clock, hour 18 or 19 is when we peak. But one of the things I wanted to show you, and this is what our generation was doing. We have 6 megawatts or 6,000 kilowatts. So we ran, what was about 10 hours that day over that peak time. And so this is actually the sheet from UAMPS that shows what they're seeing for our load. And this is what our meter totals were, which is basically our total load minus generation. And this is our various resources that we have. And what I wanted to kind of point out, just so you understand, and it kind of ties into the CFPP project a little bit, we have ownership in the Horse Butte Wind, and then we have a contract for the Pleasant Valley Wind. We have about 1,000 kilowatts or 1 megawatt in both of those projects. So we have theoretically 2,000 kilowatts of capacity. When our peak was occurring, we had 145 out of 2,000. So that's the challenge with some of the renewable resources, is you can't force the wind to blow when you need it. And so we were less than 10% of what our contractual output could have been during our peak time. And we really could have used it because at that time, power prices were in the $400 to $750 range megawatt hour. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hey, Rick,
Uh,
is it kind of that way between all of the power companies and stuff that's kind of the usage they get out of those renewable sources?
Yeah, I think wind, our 2 wind products, they call it a capacity factor or availability factor, depending on who you're talking to. Horse Butte generally is like 25 to 30% over the month, and Pleasant Valley is about 20%. So meaning out of that time, if you compared it to what it would do if it ran full 24/7, you're only getting about 20% of that output over the month. And you aren't guaranteed of when that's going to occur either. As you can see here, later that evening, Horse Butte dropped off and Pleasant Valley picked up just a little bit. But for most of the day, nothing was going on, which also contributed. It wasn't just these products or projects. Other wind farms weren't producing, and that's one of the things that was driving these prices up, is because there wasn't much resource out there. So it becomes a supply and demand issue there. Does that help? But yeah, it's
It
pretty
does, yeah.
for a wind resource. You're going to have probably between 20 and 30% capacity factor. Whereas our thermal projects usually are in the 90 or 90 plus range. One of the other projects we've just started in the last week is our Kings Row rebuild project. And so there's just a few pictures where basically the Kings Row and a couple other of the mobile home parks in the city are probably 40-plus-year-old systems, and there's a lot of outages and really difficult to find when problems occur. They're all direct buried systems. They're mixed in with water and sewer and other utilities, so it's a real challenge when we have a problem. So we've started rebuilding the Kings Row, and then just give you an idea of what some of the trenching is going on. And the challenge with this project is there's not super good information on what the interior water system is run by the park. And so they really don't have accurate records of where those are. So this yellow line here is a gas line. Of course, the gas company knows where theirs are. Communication's usually pretty good, which will help, but there are water and sewer inside the park that aren't owned by the city. So that'll be our big challenge there. And then the other, this is one of the services. You can see the routes that they're having to deal with, trying to put the new conduits in. So the other couple items as far as projects, I'd mentioned before that we do have preliminary results back on the impact fee and the rate studies from UFS. But to be quite honest, I haven't had the time with everything going on the CFPP to review those. So I'm hoping to be able to get those to you to start reviewing within the next few weeks, and maybe we can have a discussion at next month's meeting on those. So preliminary recommendation is the rates don't need to change right now, which is a good thing. The impact fees, they are recommending it'll probably be a small increase, but they haven't been updated for 8 years, so that shouldn't be too big a surprise with anyone in the construction business, which is kind of tied to that. So other department items, we have our monthly safety meetings. Again, safety is one of our key components we stress with our crews. One was on capacitors and one was on the circuit changes that we've made on the system recently. We did our annual harassment training that's required for the city. We've completed our annual employee evaluations as well. We've removed all the poles, old poles that we can, where the communication companies have transferred. The big exception to that is 100 South that we're still waiting. There's a few poles here and there that they haven't transferred as well, but for the most part, we've got caught up on those as TDS is transferred.
Hey, Rick. Did Jessica attend that harassment meeting? Because she needs that, I think.
Well, she should have. I'm sure she did, or else Ruth would have sent me some.
Okay, good.
I watched
Just
the
hope-
videos.
A few other things that had gone on. I'm sure you were all well aware of the turkey farm fire. This was a pole that got burned up at the far end on the last well, the furthest north well on the line. We were fortunate, we only lost 2 poles in that fire. There was this one and another one that wasn't burnt quite as bad. Fortunately, it didn't come down. There was just enough here to keep it up until we were able to get in there and get it replaced. I think St. George lost like 27 poles, and basically they're one segment of their whole well line up there. So they had a big project to get things going. We've had a car run over a transformer. That the transformer used to set on this basement. It's about 10 feet away. And this was in a residential area, so it kind of surprised me that they got, so this is where it was before. You can see it broke all the bushings on the transformer, so we're working on an insurance claim on that one. Getting back to some fires that went on. This was a fire that I can't remember the date, but it's the same turkey farm. The day before our poles burned down on that. This is the start of the turkey farm fire. This is up by the St. George sub. This is a picture that St. George sent over to us. Fortunately, there was no outages caused by the fire, but all the utilities in the county were on a call just in case, because everything comes through this particular substation and these lines that are in this picture. So we were as close as I want to get to having a countywide outage on that. And while this was going on, there was a fire at the opposite end of the lines up in the Vail area, Vail Central area. So it was kind of a nerve-wracking night there for a while. But unfortunately, in the end, nothing happened there. We did have some outages caused by lightning. It was what, a week ago Sunday that anybody that was here, I think, remembered that storm when it came through. Most of them just blew some fuses and we had to replace those. So fortunately, we lucked out. We didn't really have any water damage on this one as well. So we did have, like I say, a few outages, but it could have been a lot worse. So we fared pretty well on that. The rec center had one of their main circuit breakers fail, and we worked with them on helping making arrangements to get that repaired. And we've had a few rusty transformers that have been changed out, and, where people will landscape up against them and then they water and it'll rust through and then the oil leaks out and causes a transformer fault. So any questions on that? That kind of brings us up to general operations in the last couple months. There's a lot of gory details, but I don't think that we need to go over all those either. So, but those are the highlights.
How are we with our with our customers and the payments on and the COVID? Are we caught up on most of those? Are we still having issues with people struggling to make their payments?
You know, actually, in our staff meeting yesterday, the mayor brought that up with Carrie. And for the most part, we really haven't had significant increase. In fact, our shutoffs last month was down to, I think it was what, 96, Jessica? Are you muted?
Unmute. It was very low, yeah.
So that was a pleasant surprise. Now, the bills that just went out will be for August, and it'll be that hot period. So, and it actually includes the latter part of July, which was also hot. So I think this will be the biggest bill of the year. So we'll see how next week goes. The next shutoff day is on the 9th. So, but if it is COVID related, they have been working with them. To be quite honest, most of the accounts with problems, or the majority of them, are chronic ones, month in, month out. So
what do we average on shutoffs? What's
probably
high, what's low?
100 and 150 is pretty common. When you say that's fair, Jessica?
I would.
Okay. Any other questions on general operations? Okay, if not, are we ready to move to the next one?
The big discussion.
Yeah,
All right, new business. City Council to approve a recommendation to the City Council to approve the resolution of the Phase 1 carbon-free power project.
okay, now
Does anybody have any? Oh,
that
go
was
ahead.
that was the old agenda. That item had been changed to more of a
Oh,
report on the latest agenda.
So the discussion.
Yes.
okay, then you say it, because I pulled up the wrong email.
So it's
As-
discussion on,
Go ahead, Mark.
yes, discussion on participating in remaining phase 1 of the licensing period for the carbon-free power project.
Okay, let me share my screen. There we go. And so what I've done is, as we discussed back on August 13th, we had discussed that at this meeting, we would do a resolution for recommendation to the council to proceed with the next phase of the carbon-free power project. However, in that interim, there have been, I'm sure you've seen it on the news, there's Logan and Lehigh have withdrawn from the project. And there's been 4 others that have reduced their subscriptions. And so what that does is basically the pie is the same size, or the dollar amount that has to be covered, and so that shifts costs. Some of those allocations, some of the other entities are still considering a changing. And so that's why we changed it from approving the recommendation to the council to a discussion. It's because some of that's still in flux, and I don't have final numbers to present to you of where that'll shake out. And I'll go through these slides, and hopefully it'll make a little more sense of where we're at. And
So can I add something to that? I believe Beaver is in the process of deciding too, and they're most likely going to be dropping the project as well.
okay, I haven't heard that one.
So my father-in-law's on the.
I'm having a hard time hearing. What was that?
So Beaver's likely going to drop as well.
Okay, and again, what that does is if people drop out, it shifts cost to the remaining people, and then they in turn have to decide if it makes sense to move forward at that new cost level, and it becomes almost like a chicken and egg to try to catch what those numbers are going to be. So UAMPS,
Rick,
yes?
Rick, are you hearing any reasoning for their dropping out?
No, I actually talked to the Lehigh director last week, and all he'd say is they did us a favor by doing it early, which is true to a certain extent, but he never explained why. I think a lot of them are just listening to some of the propaganda that's out there. But I can't speak for each one of them. So let me go through these few slides, and then we can talk some more if that's okay. And basically what this is, it's some of the slides from last August 13th, and then I've just kind of highlighted in red where things have changed, so you can be aware of that. I updated this graph since we have a new peak for August of this 45,655. So really not a significant change there, other than it is interesting, the last 2 months, or excuse me, the last 2 years, our peak is shifted from July to August, which typically it's usually in July. And then we did have a substantial increase between this 4414 and the 45665. And then this slide really hasn't changed from the previous presentation, just again showing we are resource short, and as our load grows, it just continues to get worse, and we need something to fill that
I'm
void.
seeing you're just on the first slide. Are you
Don't see it's changing.
clicking to the other slides?
Which one are you seeing there, Todd?
Just the very first one, the carbon-free power project, power board meeting. That
Oh, how about everybody else? Is there?
I'm
The
That's all I
same.
see as well.
Yeah, it's just the first
Yep.
page.
Can you help me, Steve? Sorry about that. No, that one. Did I lose them when I went into the other?
Now we see the Washington City monthly peak load.
Okay, is it changing now?
It is.
Yes.
Okay, sorry
Yeah.
about that. Thank you, Steve. So this is the graph with again, the only thing that really changed is instead of August being an estimate, it becomes a real number here. And that our peak has the last 2 years occurred in August instead of July. And this year is actually pretty late in August, August 17th. So, and then this graph or table is the same as what was presented on the 13th. Again, just showing down here in red numbers that, you know, as time goes on, we get more and more short as the load grows. And there's different things we'll do to address that, but the carbon-free project certainly is one of those tools. And just a reminder, this is the same graph from what at the previous, on the 13th was our peak at that time. It would basically be the carbon-free project would replace the bright pink down here at the bottom is base load. But it will have some shaping ability as well. Again, same slide as previously presented, with the exception now, as of what I know, as of this morning, instead of 35 participants, there's 34. The subscription went from 214 down to 167, and again, the cost for the next phase basically is fixed. And so now it gets shared amongst this smaller amount.
What was that amount last year? Participants.
There was 35 participants. We've had 2 withdraw and 1 come in. And so that's how it stayed there, ended up at 34. And then the subscription previous, if you looked at the slides that I presented on the 13th, this was 214. This is the same slide again. To just as we'll talk here in a minute, they're the anti-nuclear people are kind of putting on a full court press right now on the project.
What's their agenda? What do they hope to accomplish?
Honestly, I don't know. Other than they're just flat out anti-nuclear, and and I think they just don't understand that the overall system cannot be run solely on wind and solar. It just doesn't work.
I wonder how much impact the having that meeting online instead of in person had, because I know it wasn't nearly the impact for me having it online instead of being up there in person.
Yeah, I agree with that. you know, I'm sure that could have contributed to it as well. Again, the key points to keep in mind for the carbon-free project, it is a safe, you know, the U.S. nuclear fleet safety record is impeccable. And I'm not aware of a single fatality from the U.S. fleet. And I think even across the world, it's one of the safer resources that's out there, regardless of the scare tactics of people. It's scalable, dispatchable. We can control when it puts out power, you know, and generally available 24/7, 365, instead of what we saw in the example of our peak day. It's cost competitive. And again, this hasn't changed as far as the $55 target for 2018 dollars. It can ramp up to complement wind and solar. Again, they're part of the puzzle, but not the sole resource that we need to be looking at. And it provides long-term stability with a 40 to 80 year project life. And there's DOE support and support at both houses of Congress. This one's again the same slide of why we're kind of in this period. At the major milestones, the project has these off ramps where people can do what they've been doing, either adjust their amounts or get in or withdraw from the project. And the next phase will be to prepare the documentation to submit to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC, for this combined construction and operating license application, which is affectionately called the COLA. One thing that's changed on this slide since the 13th is the deadline, because of some of this movement, has been moved from September 15th to September 30th. One of the real positive things that's happened in the last week is NuScale has received from the NRC their design approval, which is the first small modular reactor design approval from the NRC, and it was done ahead of schedule. And this has been one of the knocks that some of the anti-groups have said, well, you don't even have an approved design yet. Well, that one goes away at least, because that was just issued. And I believe I sent to everyone that press release. If you didn't get it, let me know, or you can go to the NuScale website and it's there as well. Any questions on that? Because basically in our COLA application, we'll say we're going to be using the NuScale design that's already been approved. And so it helps through that process.
Hey, Rick, this is Councilman Ivey.
Huh?
Sorry, I had my hand up, but I just wanted to just input a question or a comment, I guess. I appreciate commissioners and Jessica and you allowing me to do that. My question is, has NuScale been proactive in addressing why these municipalities are dropping out? And because at some point it may get to the point that cities like Washington maybe can't financially fit that burden. And I would be interested to know what they're doing to be proactive in stopping this trend and trying to reassure others that are on board that that this is still viable and that it's going to come in within the costs that were laid out. But that's just my question, Rick, if you can.
Yeah, UAMPS is, you know, they obviously, the contractual arrangement for the project is through UAMPS, so UAMPS will take the lead. They've been available to any and all, and they can bring in NuScale or Fluor or any of the other parties to participate in those. So they've been very active and participating. Of course, they can't force themselves into a, a council or a power board meeting. But they will, and I believe it's still the plan on the agenda that for the council work session next week on the 9th, that actually the Utah Taxpayers Association will make a presentation to the council, as well as UAMPS will make a presentation next Wednesday. I was going to touch on that a little later, but it will be good. Obviously, the council will hear it, but it will be good if the power board could listen in on that as well. I think it would be beneficial. I wanted to make sure that there just wasn't one side presented, and I think that's, they use the typical scare tactics, and to be honest, some of the utilities are not as resource short as we are. So depending on that position, you may be more willing to risk, or if you don't have a big need for it, then maybe you'd relook at it. But
I wonder what they're going to invest in instead if they're not going to go.
Brandy, you bring up a great point, because in all of these, nobody's offered a equivalent product that has the same type of output. The dispatchable, all they'll generally ever say is wind and solar. Well, again, that doesn't solve the problem. Those wind and solar projects rely on the hydro, the nuclear, and the fossil fuel resources to maintain the stability of the grid. And that's just cold hard facts. So, I think it's kind of a bully approach that they take, but that's my opinion.
It's for sure we're going to be going away from coal and fossil fuels for generating power.
I would definitely agree with that.
Rick, the two latest municipalities that pulled out, do you feel like that, from what you understand, was there a reason for pulling out in fear of nuclear, or was it because of a financial basis? And you may not know the answers to that, but I'm just curious.
I don't know that. I suspect a little bit. I do know, I think Logan may have been more from the fear of nuclear, and I think Lehigh was probably more financial. But again, I haven't heard what they're going to do to replace that or to come up to fill their resource shortage position. So
we're one of the bigger municipalities now, aren't we?
Right now, if the subscriptions stay as they are, we are the largest one by a couple hundred kilowatts. There's 3 or 4 others similar sized within about a megawatt of us, and then there's quite a few of the smaller ones. So that ties into this. Wells Rural Electric is the one that's been added, and then Logan and Lehigh have withdrawn, and then there's 4 others that reduced their subscription amount.
Has there been some discussion on the city on when it does not become financially viable for us to continue? Is there been some discussion on maybe a deadline or how many participants we need in order for us to continue to participate?
Yeah. UAMPS actually was trying to organize people so people would know as they made their decisions going in. Some of these cities have elected to kind of do it willy-nilly on their own instead of working together, which has been frustrating. Contractually, they have actually up to the 30th of September to withdraw. So that has been a challenge, and UAMPS hopes to have, and that's been a big discussion in our meetings, within a week or so, to have people say, we're going to do this, or we're going to recommend at least to do this. So because it does really, we can, and that's the reason why we didn't have the recommendation to the council tonight, was because things are moving and I'm not sure what to show, what those amounts are, because they're changing. As of right now, let me go to the next slide. So this 1.44, right now, with the current subscription, it would change to about 1.8 with those changes so far. So that, I think, is really the big question, is how far can we go? I mean, certainly Washington can't support the whole project for everybody, or the other now larger ones. So that's the frustrating part. UAMPS is, trying to corral it to make sure at least it's done in an organized manner so people can make the right decisions with the correct information in front of them. Does that help? I know it's not definitive, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, no, that helps, because there's gonna have to be a drop dead point where we say, no, it's just not viable for us. And it's better to know ahead of time what that point is rather than after the fact. After the September deadline, is it fairly certain that these participants will continue with the project? They still have the opportunity to bow out, but is it more likely that they'll stay in?
Yeah, well, once that next phase starts, you're committed for that phase. Does that make sense? Until the next off ramp in 2023. So by the end of September, unless they're able to move the deadline or anything like that, but right now, based on that September 30th, we're going to know, and then that'll take us through the next phase.
Rick, how often do they share the additions and the withdrawal information? Is that available in
last Thursday was the latest I had, and that's what these numbers I'm presenting here reflect. And then as different councils or power boards meet and make decisions, that will change. And apparently, like you said, if Beaver's considering, they're 3 megawatts right now, so that would have some impact, but it doesn't have the same impact that Lehigh's 20 megawatts had.
When was the last off ramp? How many years ago? Is that 2 years ago as well?
2000. Well, basically, this 2018 is when everybody got on the ramp, if you will. Does that make sense? That's when that phase started.
Was that the first time?
It was a study project before then, so it wasn't formalized until these PSC contracts were signed. So that's really when the main part of the project, financially, contractually, was committed, was in 2018.
So this is the first time there's been a trend of losing participants.
Yes.
Out of 2 times.
Yeah, and out of, up to this point when this was, keep in mind, up to this point in the project, NewScale had offered 100% reimbursement. So there was no reason, I guess, not to a certain extent. If you're assured to get your money back if it doesn't work, and we'll touch on that in a minute here on some of the things UAMPS is doing to mitigate even the current risk. So they're still working on the 3 contracts, getting those finalized in September. They were, let's see, I'm trying to see the next UAMPS meetings on September 16th. They'll probably have an interim meeting before then that will have the details of these contracts. Let me go to the next slide. One of the important things, again, this is, keep in mind the next phase is 110 million. And with use of the DOE funds, the UAMPS portion drops to 20 million, which is still a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But UAMPS has done a great job to structure this to minimize the risk to the participants. Oops. Sorry. And what was presented last month and the way the current negotiations were in the agreement with NewScale is if this $55 target isn't met in the next phase, we would get 80% reimbursement. They are actually working with NewScale to increase or make this amount of, instead of 80%, even higher. Obviously, when Logan and Lehigh withdrew from the project, that got their attention, and so I think they're more willing to remove some of those risks. But I don't have the definitive where those negotiations have come out between UAMPS and NewScale to report. So, but they are working to try to even reduce that risk further.
Is there any risk of losing the DOE support with the new political changes, if there are any?
Well, so far the project has maintained support between the Obama and Trump administrations, as well as strong support from the House and the Senate. So I guess there's always a risk because it is subject to appropriations. But most everybody that I've talked to or has presented, including from the Department of Energy, don't foresee that they don't see that as a significant risk once the initial deal is signed. And that's what they're trying to get accomplished here, hopefully within this week.
Hey, Rick.
Uh-huh.
When does our current base contract end? Is it 2004?
When you say base the contract that we have, the 5-year contract ends in March of 2022. And that's
2022.
Go ahead.
So do we have an idea of what our costs are going to be in 2022, or is there a way of looking, has anybody else got a contract they had to renegotiate currently to figure out what our costs, because obviously they're not going to go down. They're just going to go higher.
Right.
But to figure out if this is going to be feasible for us and a path that we need to continue on, is there any way of getting an idea of what we're looking at if we try to find another source?
Well, with your comment there, our current long-term contract that ends in 2022, most of the months are higher than the $55. So does that help?
It does.
If you get a $55 resource now, that would be a terrific resource for us.
And I'm just thinking it's the same thing. It's if Logan and Lehigh are in the same kind of a situation, why would they think there's something else better out there to walk away from this?
And I can't answer that. The next best alternative is going to be a combined cycle natural gas turbine. And again, this is competitive with that. And to me, on that side of things, the bigger risk is what is climate change legislation going to do to us, particularly if there's an administration change. You know, that's a big variable there that, you know, there's several states that have, and Utah could at some point, say we're going to be carbon free by X date. So it's hard to even invest in like a natural gas turbine because you don't know what that climate that's totally out of your control could be. Don't know if that answered your question or helps.
It does. It's basically saying, hey, it's unknown. These are numbers that at least some of the numbers are unknown, but if that guarantee is on our side that UAMPS is doing,
Right.
but the other side is even farther unknown. But if you look at what the trend is, this is where we're going.
Right. And we're going to have an idea. In fact, one of the other items on the general UAMP side of things I was going to report on, and we can jump ahead just a little, is we are starting working on sending out an RFP to fill the gap between 2022 to 2029. And we'll be bringing that once, there's kind of a kickoff discussion on different options that they're going to. So we'll have some information, obviously not by the end of September, that will help us at least get an idea of what that near 5 to 7, 8 year window is going to look like. But again, this is very competitive. And I think what's happening at most of these is they're focusing on this number of 1.4, if it's 1.8, it comes into play if we withdraw from the project like Lehigh and Logan did. If the project moves forward and they fail their $55, then that gets reimbursed. Right now, at least to an 80% tune. And so this number of risk, if you will, comes into play if they're still meeting the $55 and Washington elects to withdraw. That's the only time this number really comes into play. Does that make sense? So this protection here, to me, is where we should be focusing on, is our risk really isn't, if the project moves forward, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't stay in it, but if we unilaterally withdraw of our own doing, that is our exposure. That's the worst case scenario, but that doesn't mean that the project was bad or didn't meet its goals. That make sense or help? And I think
one question I have is, how much is it going to cost right at this point for Washington City to stay in the program? And if that
cost will be capitalized, meaning we won't pay anything until we take power from the project. So right now we don't get a bill. It's obviously being tracked, but we don't pay anything until the project produces power, and then it'll be recovered in that $55.
Okay.
Not even if we withdraw at this point.
No. If we withdraw right now, we would owe roughly $240,000. And Lehigh, they're going to have to pay money for some reason. Way back in the early part, Logan paid more, so they'll get a little bit back. But yeah, by Lehigh withdrawing, they're going to have to pay. I think it was $300,000 or $400,000 to withdraw to cover the costs up to this point. So again, I think people start getting nervous about this number, and in reality, we need to focus. This target we're still on target for the dollar amount that's been set for years. And we do have, if they can't meet this, right now we have an 80% minimum guarantee. So the risk goes down, it becomes 20% of this number instead of the whole number if they fail to meet their commitment. Any other questions, or it's a lot to take in?
I guess what I was trying to ask, and I'm not sure how to ask it, but if our investment is so much and then a few cities drop out and now they want us to pick up the difference, we don't really have to pick up the difference, do we? Couldn't we keep the same investment or the same outflow, but then our commitment would just drop a little bit?
Again, once everybody commits to the next phase, you're in it until the next off ramp.
But if other cities drop out, do we have to have a price increase if it's not in our budget?
So you're saying if more cities were to drop out now,
It's going to become more expensive for us to continue to invest in the program.
and we certainly could tell UAMPS, and in fact, that's how, if you looked at that sample of the draft resolution I had originally sent out last week, it caps it right now at the 1.5. And we can still say we'll commit up to 1.5. That may or may not be enough for the project to move forward. I lost my train of thought a little bit there. So we can say, yeah, this is all we can commit to the project. But depending on how everything else shakes out, the project may or may not go forward.
And
Because
that's
the cost,
sorry.
The cost for the next phase is roughly, UAM's portion is roughly $20 million. And to a certain extent, it doesn't matter if there's 100 participants or one participant. That's what it's going to cost to do that next phase.
So the security of the project's based on that NRC approval, is it not?
Is based on what? I'm sorry.
The NRC approval of those designs and moving forward with those designs. Wasn't that one of the big bullet points in their presentation?
Yeah, and they have, as of last week, they do have the NRC approval.
Which is a good step in the right direction.
Exactly. And again, it was interesting that some of them are choosing to make decisions before they even knew that. And again, to me, the price point is really where we need to focus. Because if they can't meet this, there's contractual ways to get out or suspend or do away with the project with at least a minimal risk that's much smaller than what this current number represents. And this number is if they are meeting the $55 target and we choose to withdraw on our own.
Rick, are there groups or cities that have said that they would come in if that design was approved? Can UAMPS tell us any of that?
Again, there's a lot of them that say they're interested, but it's getting them to step up to the plate has been their challenge. Now, part of the reason for that comes back to these four contracts, particularly these last three. Once they get these secured, that should be in the next week or so, then that defines the project much more than it has been up to this point. And so that makes it a more marketable product, if you will, because now they know these parameters. They'll know this reimbursement guarantee. Things become more known to them.
In my opinion, that's the key. We'll know better if this is firmed up. I'll feel a lot better about it. And I think it still makes sense. We still need to get the power. That price point is great. That's where we need to be. It's a little concerning that there are some that are backing out, but I still think that it's really a positive option for us. I think I would just feel better once it's firmed up, once the contract's firmed up.
Yes, yes, and that's, I agree 100% with that, and UAMPS understands that without these 4 contracts and the DOE, the contract with New Scale, and with Floor, if we don't know those are for sure in these parameters, we can't move forward. And again, that's one of the reasons why we kind of delayed a little bit here on what we're talking about. As far as instead of trying to approve this amount, we need to know firmer what those numbers are and what the parameters of those contracts are.
That's great. I agree with Todd, by the way, and it's great that they moved that deadline back to the 30th so that we have the time to kind of look at that. But again, I'm impressed with the NRC approval, because the DOE funding is based on that NRC approval too. They couldn't move forward with that funding, asking for that funding without that NRC, from what I'm familiar with.
Yeah, and so that's, you're right on the nose there, Mark. That there's no denying I guess the technology isn't new, but the packaging of that technology is new.
Right.
It's really the difference. It's the same process or reaction that's been used in the nuclear fleet for many, many decades, and running around the oceans in the the naval ships. And so the reaction, it's really the heat exchange mechanism is the new thing in the packaging in this application.
Do you think we need to have another meeting in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I got a slide on the proposed schedule, so maybe we'll hold off on that just a minute, and I'll kind of explain how we see things happening.
So,
any more questions on this general? And again, I understand your concern. I definitely have those same concerns. It doesn't help to have people, backing out, obviously. Again, I don't think that means that it's a bad project by any means. I think just, people maybe are just apprehensive. I can't speak for all the reasons that they have done what they did.
So if something happens that this does not happen on their end, and we are reimbursed, where do we have a plan to go from there? Just a backup plan, or do we stick with what we have currently?
So at what point if this, where we're at now, doesn't go through?
So if this whole project, for some reason, if people were to back out enough that it doesn't go through, that they can't move forward with the project, which doesn't sound like it's going to happen, especially with the stages that they're in right now. Do we have a backup plan for where we need to go after that?
Our short-term simplest would be that we could add generators real easy to our facility. We have space for 5 more units out there. Again, that's natural gas fired. And then possibly look at combining with another UAMPS or other cities to probably do a turbine.
Okay. You had mentioned the generators in the last meeting, so that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, in fact, at some point we ought to maybe with one of these meetings actually go out and tour the plant, and you can see what's out there. But there's 3 generators right now, and there's space for 8 total. So that would be the simplest, quickest way we could add generation capacity. Okay, anything else? So again, these numbers that were originally presented will most likely change. I can pretty well assure you they will. And that's the next question is, whatever this number is, do we feel like we can move forward with that amount confidently. And so this is the kind of how I see the, the scheduling going, because we'd want to have the power board recommendation ahead of the council approval. Right now we're planning on having this on the September 23rd council meeting. And I would anticipate an interim power board meeting sometime before the 23rd. Again, a lot of that depends on the information that we get from UAMPS and they get from the other members of where they're at. They're hoping next week to have that firmed up. You know, again, people can still change even after they've given that indication. And what I've indicated to them that we're still committed to the project, but there's a certain amount that, you know, everybody can't drop out and left with 2 or 3 funding the whole thing. And I think they understand that, obviously. So that's the basic timing. I would suspect the interim power board meeting would be sometime the week of the 14th, or it'd be the 21st or 22nd, just before the council meeting. And then my normal UAMPS meetings are on September 16th. We had a meeting yesterday. I'll have another meeting on Thursday. Probably have 1 or 2 meetings next week as well. So we've been meeting as a PMC at least once a week, if not more often, for the last probably 2 to 3 months. So. And as you get questions or concerns, let me know. You know, we can, if I don't know the answer, we can certainly find it out and get it to you. Again, there's just a reminder, next week, the current plan is that Utah Taxpayers Association wanted to make a presentation to the council on the 9th at the work session. And then I've asked UAMPS to also be on that agenda for 2 reasons. One, that they can present their side and then correct any of the errors that UTA may present, which they've been more than willing to share in their news articles, and their letters and stuff like that contain just things that aren't correct. So. Any more questions on the CFPP? Nice and simple, huh? And if you have any insights, again, concerns, let me know, and I can certainly bring those up to the PMC on our next meeting as well. Okay, so that's, for the most part, that's the item 4 on the agenda.
All right, sorry, I'm moving here. So, yeah, any other questions, comments?
I guess the only comment that I keep wanting to say, but I don't bring up, but the only frustration I have with the project is how long it's taking and how much red tape and stuff that they have to go through. But there's nothing we can do about that here. It's just the political beast that nuclear is, but that for me is the frustrating part, and I can see why. You know, it's a long-term investment for a quality product that is going to resolve a lot of the issues that we've got in the need for power. But that is, you know, my frustration is just how long it takes and how much red tape there is to work through.
I definitely feel your frustrations as well. I wish I had a better answer. I wish it was coming on quicker.
Yeah, and I wish, I'm not so concerned about the timing. I'm more concerned about the unknowns. So I'll feel better about when we hear more, what's going on with the contracts. The more we know about it, I mean, we understand that the time frame hasn't changed a whole lot as far as how long it's going to take the project to come online. It's just the unknowns that is a concern.
Right, right. And as we move forward, I mean, obviously that's one of their goals is things will become more known and less risky as we get more of the design done and those kind of things. So that's definitely the goal.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's up to you now, Mike.
Okay, I don't have an agenda in front of me, so what? Wait, I think I do have an agenda in front of me. Oh, UAMPS report.
Yep. Pretty, and like, hopefully, I think this will go fairly quick here. For the UAMPS, we did have the member conference on August 16th and 17th. It sounded like Randy was able to attend. Were there others?
Yeah, I was able to.
And what are your thoughts, comments?
I'm a lot like Randy. I didn't get near as much out of it just because it was on my computer and I tended to get interrupted during the day and was, obviously trying to do other things where, that's always hard to do. But I got a little bit. I was able to listen to a little bit.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I had the same problem and same feelings as well, because people would come in and you don't want to, oh yeah, you weren't able to focus quite as much, so.
I think because it was a long, if it was like an hour or 2 hours to set a time, that kind of time, but yeah, we all kind of was doing other things while we were listening in.
Yep.
I thought the information was helpful and the presentations were well prepared, but yeah, just kind of lost a little bit of its sting or appeal just because we're not there and feeling the energy that's in the room and from the speakers and stuff. It just lost a lot that way, but I still think that this is the very best option that's out there for having a carbon-free footprint and an inexpensive way to produce power. Again, that my frustration is just I don't understand why everybody doesn't see that way, and why there's so much red tape and why so many loopholes. I'm sure there's a lot of lawyers getting rich over this thing, but I just wish we could get it off the ground and go.
Yep, for sure. That's kind of my thoughts as well on the member conference. It was good. The one quote I like from the WAPA representative who runs some of the major transmission lines, his quote was, "Physics always trump policy," meaning you can say you want to support the system on wind and solar, but if they're not there, the physics of the system, it won't work. So I guess that's the engineer in me coming out that kind of picked up on that quote. So I think that's very, very appropriate. Some other things going on at the UAMPS is helping and supporting us and on the different UAMPS projects. We've had a couple meetings on the strategic plan. We're doing that in conjunction with Mount Pleasant and with Brigham City as well. We'll have our next meeting next Tuesday, September 8th at 2 o'clock. If you're interested in listening in, participating on that, you're more than welcome. I think I've sent the invite out. If not, let me know and I can get it to you. And Kimberly Roosh, who's on the Zoom meeting now, as well as Jake Bennett and Mike Roosh, no relation to Kimberly, have been helping us out. And we're just starting to put together like the mission statement and values and stuff together. So when we get that, we'll present those to you as well for review and comment. If there's something in particular you think the department needs to focus on, or concerns you've heard from your neighbors, or please let me know and we can bring those up and see how we can incorporate that into our future planning. On the Central St. George project, we've touched base on a little bit of the fires and stuff that went on. We will be having on October 15th, they call it a post-season report, and that's where all the utilities in the county basically get together. We evaluate how the summer went and planning for the future and what improvements need to be made there. We continue to work on lots of right-of-way issues on the line that goes from the St. George Mill Creek sub, there by their generating plants, up to Hurricane, out by Purgatory. There's just a lot of development going on that line, and so we've had several right-of-way issues that we just had to coordinate and work with developers on. We did have they're called voltage transformers at 2 different occasions. There's 3 large transmission lines that feed into the Red Butte substation up there by Central. And they had some equipment issues on 2 different lines separated by about 2 weeks over the peak time. So we were feeding only on 2 of the 3 for a few days. Fortunately, everything held together and nobody knew the wiser other than those watching those. So it's interesting sometimes at how close you can be to having a lot more challenges on our plate. The Payson Nebo project has been running really well. The gas pricing in July particularly was very good. And they've been running pretty well 24/7 for the last 2 to 3 weeks. Generally, they shut off at night when the loads are down, but with this heat, they've been running almost daily. The Vale project is the heat recovery off of the Kern River line, the Kern River gas compressors. And as long as those gas compressors are running, that's a really good, solid project for us. We have a megawatt out of that, and we typically get between 800 to the full megawatt, depending on how much they're compressing gas. I mentioned briefly before, our long-term contract ends in March of 2022. And so UAMPS is kicking off a project to start looking at what product might fit everyone's needs, starting in, that would pick up when that other contract ends. And there's a couple different options, and they'll be presenting what the market brings, and it could be a combination of different ways. It's not just us, there's multiple utilities that have similar needs to ours that are in that current contract. On the renewable side of things, at last board meetings, we officially formed the Steel Solar Project, which right now our subscription is about 1.3 megawatts. That'll be located up by Plymouth. Right now our commitment in that study phase is, I think it was $800. So it seemed like that was a pretty easy investment to pursue that a little further and see what the contract terms come out of that. So as that progresses, we'll bring that back to you. The pool, we've already touched base that prices in August, July prices for the wholesale market really weren't too bad. And actually were probably a little lower than typical Julys, but August really made up for it with some very high prices on some of the hours. So we'll see where we sit when we get the August power bill here in a couple weeks. But we've got, reserves in place to deal with that if it gets too far out. But our July pricing or bill actually came in less than what was anticipated. So at least we're starting out on the right foot for July. I talked about the wind projects, and that's really my UAMPS report. Again, a lot of my time's been myself as well as the UAMPS staff has been consumed by the carbon-free project right now until we get through these next few weeks. So that's my report. Got any questions?
Thanks for all your hard work, Rick.
I appreciate it. Thank you for yours.
Thank you, Rick. And I know I talked to a couple neighbors and people around town that did have power outages and stuff during all the storms. And I know they're appreciative of all the work and sacrifice that our guys do. So please, again, pass on to them our accolades and let them know how much we appreciate what they do for us.
We will for sure. In fact, I almost felt bad when that storm was going on. I texted the lineman that was on call and I said, if we had any issues, and he said no. And it was about 30 seconds later, he texts me back and says, oh, I just got my first call. So maybe I jinxed it there. But yeah, they do great. And in fact, when those occur, we have one person on call, but that night, actually, 4 of them went out and responded. So they're more than willing to help each other out. So it's a great group that we have.
Good. We do have good crew. Good crew. So, okay. Any other questions or concerns or items?
One question.
Oh, Rick. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if everybody's been getting the emails from Jackie at UAMPS. I know I just added Andy's and Mark's names to their list.
Yes, I have.
Yes, I've been getting them.
I'm
Okay.
getting them also. Thank you. I appreciate that. And you'll send us any new updates if you hear any updates on with UAMPS.
Yes, for sure. Sure I will. And obviously we'll let you know as far as when we propose to have a interim power board meeting.
I haven't been getting those emails. This is Mark, but I expect if you put my name in, they'll get to me here.
Yeah, and I forwarded one today to Mark and Andy.
Yep, you've been good to forward them. So
Okay.
I think I've gotten all the communications that we needed.
Okay, and then so that last one today was there's some guy that they've got that's doing a press conference tomorrow, and usually UAMPS will respond. They try to avoid getting a back and forth going as best they can, but they want to make sure the correct information is out there.
That's tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Yeah, that's what they indicated in that email. So just be ready for that, and we'll keep you posted. And now that I've got everybody with all the changes, we've got our new councilman on the list for them. Everybody should be getting the correct information from UAMPS as well.
Okay. So you said you had a slide and you were going to tell us what's the plan for meeting again? And
Oh, you missed that. It'll
Did
be,
I phase out then?
it'll be before, our plan is to have it on the council agenda for the 23rd. So the
Okay.
power board, interim power board meeting would be either the week of the 14th or the 21st, 22nd, depending on how the information, I want to have a complete package to be able to give you guys to make a informed decision on that recommendation.
Okay.
So right now,
Are there
what I'll
any?
tell you is it'll be before the 23rd.
Okay. Any conflicts that anybody can bring up or think
Oh,
of?
I'd say
None?
just let us
Okay.
know when the meeting is and we'll do our best to get on it.
Okay, appreciate it. And is 5 o'clock as good a time as any, whenever we do it, or?
Good for me, yep.
Yeah, 5 o'clock works for me.
Okay,
Me as well.
Okay, then, is there a motion to dismiss?
I'll motion to dismiss.
I'll go ahead and second.
So Randy first and Todd second. Randy, go ahead and start us with a vote.
Meyer, aye.
Todd,
Spriggs, aye.
Bowser, aye.
Mark, Andy,
Palmer, aye.
and Dinsmore, aye. So until our next meeting, 22nd, 23rd, 14th, whatever it is. Thank you all for coming.
and then it may not hurt for you guys if you're able to just view the council meeting work session next Wednesday on the 9th, and it starts at 4:30. And last I looked, there was one item before the UTA presentation and ahead of that, so it'll probably be 4:45 or something like that. So
Is there a link to get into that, or do we jump on the YouTube channel?
It is on the YouTube channel, but if you go to washingtoncity.org/meetings, there's a link there to YouTube as well, so you don't have to memorize anything except that
Okay.
link.
Okay.
thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, you guys.